Also part of the CCKT board, we also have Tom Butt is here. Tom? Yep, back. And the beautiful thing is everybody sort of helps to put this together in some way, even if it's just talking about how we're going to do this, and it's tremendous, or doing posters or whatever it is. Now, I just wanted to do first of all, if you have a cell phone or a pager, could you please turn that off for now, just during the meeting, so we minimize interruptions. Also, we're going to ask during the meeting not to have photographs or filming that maybe what I'll say is that could be distracting. I know there's some of you here probably with the press, but just in a way that's very subtle, okay? Because this is about hearing our candidates tonight, and for you to be able to ask some good questions and to learn for all of us. And let me see. Jeff will be doing some live streaming at the back, which we've done at two or three other meetings, and it's worked very successfully for people who've been unable to attend. So, and I believe, Jeff, that's something that people can also go back and see afterwards, right?
Yeah, we're not going to live stream it, but it'll be up on our YouTube channel.
Okay, great. And so you can pass it. Yeah, and that's open to everybody to view. Let's see. Washrooms are located just over the side here. There's water at the back if you like some water. And so CCKT is often known as a citizens group that advocates for preserving the natural environment, the rural villages of King, and some smart planning. But surprisingly, one of our key mandates is to engage citizens and to help to inform them in whatever the issues are. And so tonight you're part of that, and it's great to see so many people come out. Along that line, I want to welcome our candidates tonight. We have Deb Schultz, who's here representing the Liberal Party, and Ann Reagan. CCKT is often known as a citizens group that advocates for preserving the natural environment, the rural villages of King, and some smart planning. But surprisingly, one of our key mandates is to engage citizens and to help to inform them in whatever the issues are. And so tonight you're part of that, and it's great to see so many people come out. Along that line, I want to welcome our candidates tonight. We have Deb Schultz, who's here representing the Liberal Party, and Ann Reagan. Now you're probably wondering and thinking, I think there are more candidates, and there are. And so I just want to quickly outline a little of the process we used and where we are tonight. We also have Anna Roberts is registered as a candidate for the Conservative Party. Anton Kasich, People's Party of Canada, and Emilio Bernardo Cedillo, New Democratic Party. What we did is we tried to find out who is registered and try to get information out. It's been a little bit of a challenge to find contact information, but we were able to get invitations out to directly to both Emilio and to Anna. And what I wanted to, and an indirect invitation to Anton, but I haven't heard back from him. Anna's campaign team informed us that she wouldn't be available to come tonight. Possibility of the meeting on October 10th. And we extended an invitation to both Emilio and Anna to send a statement if they'd like for tonight. And I did receive one back from Emilio, and so I'll read that in respect of him. He says, after growing up in Toronto and Caledon, Emilio moved to King-Vaughan in 2014 for university. He earned a bachelor degree of fine arts in music from York University, where he was active with student government, academic councils, and international relations organizations. Emilio works at Long & McQuaid, North York. That's the music store that you may be familiar with on Steeles Avenue. As a student support worker and ambassador, Emilio advocated for students' rights and access to services and resources, as well as funding for initiatives within the arts and politics communities on campus and in surrounding communities. Emilio helped coordinate the Keep Hydro Public Initiative in King-Vaughan during his time as Vice President of Vaughan NDP. Emilio is standing with Jagmeet Singh and the NDP for affordable housing, fair taxes, support of vulnerable and marginalized communities, universal dental and pharmacare, public transportation, education, and a clean economy that creates good green jobs. Emilio apologizes for the absence tonight as a result of a conflicting work schedule. He looks forward to speaking with members of the Nobleton and surrounding communities in the coming weeks. He's affirmed that he will be coming on October 10th for the King City meeting that we're hosting. And just going on here, I'd like to introduce to you now our moderator for the evening. Someone who's probably no stranger to most of you, if not all of you, and that's Cleve Mortalini. And we're really glad to have Cleve join us tonight, and he's also volunteered to be the moderator in King City 9 days from now. And so this is a learning curve, right, Cleve? I need to announce that Cleve did host the federal All Canada's meeting, or not host, moderated the meeting that we hosted 4 years ago. So he has some experience there. Many of you may know that Cleve grew up in King City. And during that time, very involved in the community. I think soccer, hockey, and all kinds of people, and just developed a real passion for the community. In his early adult years, he was off to university at York University in Trent, where he studied English and literature. And I learned it's fascinating how he is applying those skills. He's been working in the engineering field, and I've probably talked to him after about how those go together, but I've learned those skills are vitally important in probably engineering and in a variety of areas. The whole communication piece. Cleve, as you know, also with his passion, came back to King City. I'm not sure about what year, 20 years ago, Cleve, or close to that? Yeah, close to that, yeah, with his wife, Catherine, and they've raised a family here in King, and Cleve continues to be a King Township resident. And with his passion for King, he served as municipal councillor for 12 years, representing Ward 1 in King City. And I know that Cleve is very glad to be here tonight. This is, and we really welcome you to this time. I'm just going to say on a personal note, over the years as councillor, I got to know Cleve better and better. Actually, I met Cleve before that when he was serving with an engineering firm. And one of the things that I've always admired about him is his reflective, thoughtful nature. And I know he's what I would call a very fair-minded individual. And I've appreciated just the many talks we have and his interest in community, provincial, and federal issues. So without further ado, Cleve Mortalini.
Thank you, Bruce, for that very nice introduction. So I'm your moderator tonight, and I'm going to explain some of the rules and format that we have. We want to make sure that we get lots of questions heard from the public that the candidates can answer. We are just a quick outline of the format, general procedures. We're going to have introductory comments from each of the candidates, followed by some CCKT questions that have been prepared by the board for each of the candidates, and also questions from the audience. As we move along through each segment, I'll explain the rules for that. But as we get into each of the candidates' introductory comments, they'll be given 4 minutes max, and there'll be a timer, our official timer. We'll warn them 15 seconds before their time limit is up.
Is that cowbell? I'm going.
Close. Tiny cowbell. Yeah. So glad to see so many people out here. I think I'm always interested in our federal and provincial elections, and it's great to be able to hear the candidates speak. So let's see, each candidate. So Albers, have we chosen who gets to go first on this?
And would you like to go first?
Yes, sort of. Well, you need to work out.
Okay. All right. So we'll hear first from Anne Rainey. She has comments.
Do I have to turn this on?
Yes, I think so.
Did he explain that when they ring, it's 15 seconds before?
How do you do? I'm Anne Rainey, and I'm your Green Party candidate here in King-Vaughan. Lately, I'll tell you a bit about myself. Lately, I've been working as my mom's primary caregiver and not been working as an engineer. I lost my mother this year, and I've inherited her dog. And so I wanted to mention that because I am quite fully aware over a decade of watching my mom with dementia from a irregular heartbeat or minor heart attack and macular degeneration. And we did our best to keep her in her home where she wanted to be, and she had a good quality of life for a long time. But it's not easy, and I understand fully what that's all about. Before that, way before that, I was working as an engineer. And when I attended university in the 1980s in Kingston, I was aware of the depth of understanding about a threat to our planet called global warming, because it was very well known at the university level and very well known also in the halls of government. Not so well known at the time by the public, and that was the challenge to come next. The science was known, and in the 80s, Canada led the world, and I thought everything was good, I could do something else. Something happened in the last 30 years. A pause button was hit, and we are now facing a climate emergency. We do not have a lot of time, and there'll be more on that later, I'm sure. But I wanted to also express my great disappointment that it is only Deb Schultz and I up here. This is one of the things that has happened in the last 30 years. There has been a declining and a fraying of the relationship between Canada's government and Canada's society. The contract is practically in shreds. I said this in 2015, I'll say it again. I consider meeting everybody at every opportunity and having them a chance to compare candidates, especially in a thing like this, to be the #1 obligation of a candidate and a job interview. And when I was in work, you didn't get the job if you didn't show up for the job interview. There should be consequences for not making this a priority, in my view. And I know that certain parties have felt it was somehow strategy or expedient for whatever reasons. I will give the benefit of the doubt at this point, but in general, I'm very disappointed that we do not have all the candidates here for you to see. And for those of you who may have come to see a candidate you wanted to hear from in particular, I'm also sorry for that. There should be consequences, and if the media is in the room, I'd like to know who they are. Anybody? That's a shame too. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. We'll now hear from the candidate from the Liberal Party.
And I'll stand up too, because those in the back can't see us when we're sitting down, so I think that was a good movement. I do feel very much like you that it is a job interview that we're having here today, and that you should show up for the job interview if you want the job. And so I'm very disappointed. It was not like we did not have enough advance warning, and I don't know what else is more important than to be here to talk to you and to talk with you and to put our thoughts forward for a very important organization. Concerned Citizens of King has been leading for a very long time to make, in this community, to bring people together and make sure they have that chance to hear from the candidates, but also your advocacy on the ground to make sure that we're bringing environmental issues forward has been, outstanding. So when you asked, would you come to a couple of sessions, it's like, absolutely. And both Anne and I were at the one last time, 4 years ago, and the NDP lady showed up, and unfortunately, it's a bit of a trend. The Conservative did not show up, so that's a very bad sign. I think they feel they don't need to, and I think that's very unfortunate. So a little bit about me. I came to Canada in 1966 with my mom as an immigrant, my mom and dad, and my parents did not have very much, so I grew up in a mobile home. And I have watched my parents work very, very hard to make sure that I had a chance. And I got an amazing chance to go and have a great education down in the States at Princeton University. And I got my mechanical and aerospace engineering degree. And I had the opportunity for 22 years of work in business and I was allowed to be an engineer at that time. I don't have my professional engineering, so I can't call myself an engineer right now, but at the time I could. And I worked as an engineer and in management. And so I learned a lot about business, and then I had kids. And when I had my oldest son, he wasn't well. He had a lot of asthma. And I was in the hospital and I saw so many other kids on respirators and asthma, and I thought, what is going on? Something's terribly wrong. And I really woke up. I always cared about the environment, but I really woke up to the fact that we were not doing a good job, not for our seniors and not for our kids, because they were being the most affected by the quality of the air. So in 2004, after I had my second son, I came out of that job to sit on the Greenbelt Task Force. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. To volunteer. I left my job of 22 years to go and volunteer on the Greenbelt Task Force because I thought it was such an important initiative as we were seeing sprawl and the destruction of our environment, especially in York Region and the GTA. And that led me into politics. And I became a regional councillor, and then I had the privilege of serving as your MP for the last 4 years. And I have been very proud of the work that we've been able to do as we're stitching a good economy with an improved environment. And we need to do more, and it's not fast enough. And one of the challenges that I've had is the pace of government at the federal level is very slow. But we are on the right track, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But I wanted to say, I'm so grateful for all of you coming to the town halls, the meetings. You've written me letters, you've made calls, and you've really shared with me what's been important to you, and that's helped me to drive the agenda with the Liberal Party. And despite what you've heard about Trudeau, I wouldn't be running under his banner if he didn't have a good heart. He's made mistakes, but he's a good person and he's trying to do the right thing. So I'm proud to be your representative for the Liberal Party, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you to both candidates. In our next segment, CCKT has prepared 3 questions. I'll outline the format here. Each candidate will be given up to 3 minutes to answer each question. I will read the question aloud. For the first prepared question, each candidate will be given an opportunity to answer. Then I'll read the second prepared question, and the candidates will be able to answer in reverse order, and then the third question, and so on. Following this, we will go into questions from the audience. So again, we don't have, we haven't planned who would go first? Yeah, does anyone feel strongly about who goes first?
I don't mind.
Okay.
We'll alternate back. That was your suggestion?
That's
Happy
great.
to take that.
Okay, I'm gonna read aloud these questions. And if you'd like to need to repeat, just let me know. Okay, so question number 1. In light of the increasingly frequent climate disasters worldwide, including in Canada, the issue of climate change and climate action has become a voting issue. Recent polls show that Canadians place climate change among their top 3 concerns. What specific steps will your party take to reduce carbon and other GHG emissions in Canada, and by how much and by what timeline? And how will your party support municipalities in their goals to reduce carbon emissions?
We've got 4 minutes, right?
3
minutes.
Three minutes.
So there's so much to say here. So I'm going to be quick. One of the things that I was proud of, that we committed to grow our economy at the same time that we were going to work to improve our environment. So that's kind of unlike the Conservative government that was before us, that basically gutted our environmental legislation to try and grow the economy, and they weren't doing it very successfully. But obviously we've had a little bit more success than they have, as we have grown our economy. We've had over 1 million jobs, and so that's good. But it's the environment we're focusing on here today. So what did we do? Right off the bat, we ratified the Paris Agreement to limit the global average temperature rise well below 2 degrees, and we continue pursuing efforts to limit that increase to 1.5. But we know we need to do a lot more. even than what we have brought forward. We work with the provinces and territories right off the bat for the first year to create a pan-Canadian framework on climate change. It was with municipalities, Indigenous people, businesses, and environmental groups. That was the right way. I heard it from the Commissioner. It's the right way. You cannot try to impose. You need to work with everyone to come up with an agreement on how we're going to move forward in Canada. So that's what we did. And it was a multi-pronged approach that included a price on pollution, developing other complementary actions to reduce emissions, supporting adaptation and climate resilience, and investing in clean tech, innovation, and jobs, all the while developing a pathway to reach that target of 2030 in 2030. The First Ministers agreed to a 2030 target of 30% reduction below 2005 levels of GHG emissions. However, we know it's not enough, so we are now committing in our new policy and platform to net zero emissions for Canada by 2050. We implemented regulations that will reduce methane emissions by 40% to 45 by 2025. That's not very far off, and there's a lot of work to be done because a lot of methane comes out of the oil fields and the issues that are going on with fracking. So it's not a good situation. There's a lot of work to be done. We're phasing out coal, and we're transitioning to 90% clean electricity grid. And we're helping with that transition through $150 million to support priority projects and diversify economies in the affected communities where we're phasing out those coal and stopping use of diesel. We created an independent climate institute that's arm's length and is policy oriented. You know what? There is a long, long list. I'm not going to be able to say it all. So come and see me at the end. I'll tell you all the things that we've been doing to make sure that we can reduce our emissions and meet our target. Thank you.
We will now hear from the Green candidate.
A lot of things go through my mind when I hear about any of the Liberals, including the Prime Minister, talking about their plan. They've had 4 years of a majority government, and they're promising the same thing they didn't do for us in the last 4 years. And because of that, we have an emergency. And I'm not saying that. It's the scientists of the world that are saying that. On October 8, 2018, an intergovernmental panel for climate change, that's the world's top scientists that have been doing this for years. They came out to say, because they were asked, 1.5 okay or 2 okay? What's the difference in the consequences? And the difference is huge, and we must not go past 1.5 degrees. That's global average temperature above pre-industrial times. We were already 1.1. We now only have until 2030. According to them, their target, the science, they know what they're talking about. They told the world, if we don't hold back from 1.5 degrees, and if we're lucky, just touch it and come down, we can't linger around it, we will not be able to guarantee a livable biosphere. Sounds dramatic. That's what's so frightening. These are scientists, and up till now, if you read the reports, as I have over the years, they use language that is very cool and dispassionate. And they are being dispassionate when they say that, because that's just the truth. So 45% of 2010 emission levels must be reduced. Global emissions of 2010's levels has to come down by 45% by 2030. Further, the increasing emissions that have gone up and up every year and continued in the last 4. The global average temperature, if Dr. Martin were here, he would tell you, doesn't just go up every year, but it goes up by more every year. We've been accelerating our output. And a country like Canada that used to lead the world in the 80s disappeared. And we're still not on we're laggards. We cannot afford now to do incrementalism. You've heard Elizabeth May say that, I hope. This idea that we have to grow an economy while we're dealing with this crisis, the Greens want to make sure that we have a balanced budget in 2014. Ask me about it. The bell went, I have 15 seconds. Let me say more later, but this is a paradigm shift, I think, that's required.
Okay, I'll read aloud the second question, then we'll go in reverse order with Henry answering first. There are approaches and methods for just transitions to a green, renewable energy economy, minimizing economic dislocation while creating new opportunities for many more workers and businesses. What will your party do to ensure just transitions for Canadian workers, businesses, and communities?
I was interested to get this question because a just transition is really for people who are in the fossil fuel industry. I don't know if that's a huge factor here in King-Vaughan, but of course the TSX is high on natural resources, it's high on fossil fuels, and it is a big industry for the TSX. So we do have to make sure, because what we're doing is going off fossil fuels. It's happening, folks. It has to happen. But how we do it is what we should have been talking about over the last 30 years. At least even the last 4. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a little upset. We want to do it as a just transition, and we know how, and I could read to you pages here. We know that we have to protect jobs. We are going to guarantee jobs for the people that will lose it in the sector. It's not happening all at once, we know that, but it has to happen quickly. And we have to start training people. Some jobs are transferable, some people might be near retirement. There will be a pathway to retirement. We're going to build a bridge program for that. And they're hopefully going to be able to transfer, most of them will be able to transfer their skills. I think Elizabeth May has spoken at length on this. There are orphaned wells deep enough. We could do geothermal. People who have been putting together roustabouts, putting together drilling in traditional natural crude extraction can be helping. There's welders and pipe fitters that could be making windmills. We can have people relearned and retooled. So there's a massive amount of money, and we have a costed budget on all of these things. And retraining and setting up programs and guaranteeing those jobs is a big part of it. Retraining and resettlement. I have to tell you, this platform was difficult enough. It's always tough on the Greens because there's enough detail in it. And I knew it solid in 2015. This is, when I took the pictures out, this is a 60-page document. And it's costed with 9 pages of what are summarized costings, 9 pages of costed platform in table form. So if you really want me to, you said detail. If you don't want me to do that, I can't do that properly in the time allotted. It is a requirement, though, that we make sure that people in Alberta are working, and that they're going to be taking on a huge opportunity for all of us to go into renewable, where the source of energy is limitless. The source of energy is limitless, and the costs, once we build the infrastructure, will come down, and you'll be paying pennies for your well-insulated home to heat. I always think I have to stop at the bell.
So just to touch on a couple of things that Anne said, that we made it sound like we haven't been doing anything. We've been doing a lot, and actually, if you look at the data, and I have it at the back, and we are a data-driven party. The emissions levels are actually flattened for the last little while, and the economy has been growing. So we are taking action, and it is working. But we need to be coming down, not flattening. So I completely understand. But that would not happen if we hadn't been taking strong action and making a change. You would have been climbing. So we are taking action, and I want to make sure that you know that it's working, but we have to do a lot more. So in terms of transitioning, we formed a Just Transition Task Force with representatives from the labor, from business, and from human resources, to get together and look at this issue and go across the country and meet in communities where transition is going to be very much of an issue, especially with coal, where they do coal mining. And looking to see what can we do in those communities to help them as we phase out coal, and we are in the phase out coal process. So there is obviously a lot of work that we need to do, but that includes a lot of investment in those communities, because if there isn't an economic opportunity for those transitioned workers, they gotta move. And then you've got little towns and areas dying. That's not what we're trying to do. So we're looking at those communities, we're looking at what economic opportunities are available, we're looking at what investments are required to make that happen, and then how do we get the employees of the coal industry and of diesel and all the other fossil fuel industries that we're trying to phase out moved over into those other opportunities. Because a lot of these communities are built up around one particular industry. So we have to make investment, and it's not going to happen like that. But it is happening, and we are working on it. And that's an important job that we need to do. Because if we're crashing communities and we're crashing economies, those people are not going to be supportive of the change that we have to do in this country. So we have to bring people with us on this journey. We put a price on pollution, and people are not happy about that. I hear it at the door. They don't understand what it's all about. They don't understand why they have to pay. That's why we put a climate action incentive and gave people the money back. But we're still making them think about it so they can make that change. But we have to do it carefully, because if you're very harsh and people lose their jobs, they will not be voting for that government again. And we see a little bit about what happened in Ontario, where they made very strong stamps, and they ended up getting that cost onto the electricity grid without an explanation, and you saw the action that people took. And we'll be ping-ponging back and forth, and we don't have time to do that. So we're doing it, bringing people with us on this journey, and that's the important steps that we're doing. There's much more in terms of money that we're investing in innovation and development, but that's for another day.
Okay, I'll read aloud the final question, and Deb will answer it first. In the past 10 years, several parts of Canada have experienced significant flooding and high water levels, and recently the conservation authorities in Ontario have had their mandate reduced. With the widespread headwaters of the East Humber River and other rivers in King Township, major rain events will very likely affect King and those downstream of us significantly. Can you tell us what federal plans you have to help protect us from storm and flood damage?
And I'm going to bring attention again. You can see the difference that a Conservative government, they came in and they're basically trying to constrain the groups, and the TRCA was one of them, that is very much trying to protect the environment and protect us from the damage of the increased climate risks. And that's something that the federal government previously had also done. They stripped the Fisheries Act, the Environment Act, to try to get more business at the expense of the economy. And we just can't be doing that anymore. And that's why we're doing them together. So Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund is something we launched in our term. It's a 10-year, $2 billion national program that's designed to help communities better deal with the climate risks and the impacts of climate change. Hundreds of millions of dollars have already been rolled out, and we have seen some right here in our own riding. We've done flood mitigation funding for our area, and we've also done a tree canopy funding for York Region that we'll be getting some within our riding as well. Because it's not the answer, but it is a part of the answer, to have more trees to help us suck up the water, purify the air, and keep the temperature down. And so this is just a multi-pronged approach. We doubled the gas tax funding, where the money goes directly into municipalities. And that's part of the question you asked before, how are we helping municipalities? By getting money directed to municipalities rather than having to funnel it through the province. We funneled unspent infrastructure money right through to the municipalities. So money that the province didn't spend, and in old files, we gathered that money up and we funneled as much as we can to municipalities, because they're on the front lines. They're the ones that are dealing with the flooding. They're the ones that are dealing with the infrastructure that isn't designed to handle the new reality that we're facing. We've also supported public transit, because obviously we know that we've got to get more people out of their cars and give them options. So these are some of the things that we've done. $595 million on the GO line That's a critical piece of infrastructure for this region and for us. And so I was very proud to be able to get that money there. And 200 million for York Region Transit to expand, to give people an option to get out of their cars. We don't have very good public transit in our area up here, and we need to do better. We've provided, as I said, 10 million for tree canopy restoration in York Region, which I'm very proud to have seen. And we created a low carbon economy challenge fund, so the municipalities could bring forward their projects that will help them reduce emissions and create green growth. So these are all things that we've been doing to spur municipalities. And the last one, we launched a climate action fund that provided 3 million annually to be able to support raising awareness and increasing participation on climate change, because again, if we don't get the public engaged and working with us, we will not be successful. Thank you.
I'd like to finish the first one by saying our target of 60% reduction instead of 30%, as the Liberals have from which they got from Mr. Harper's government, is the only one of all the parties that will meet the scientist requirements of 45% 2010 levels. Our baseline is 2005. 60%, we were told by the UN, 30% is half what it should be, and they had 4 years to change it, and they didn't. There was always an option to change your target as you wish. You're not bound to your target. You can always improve it. So I wanted to make that clear. I didn't get a chance to answer that second part of your question before. The Greens will go to 60% reduction by 2030. And yes, Deb did a good job of outlining the recommendations of the task force on just transition for Canadian coal power workers and communities, which is we have here adopted for oil and gas as well as coal. And I didn't want to get into the details, but we can. Now, as far as municipalities, I'm looking now at our costing. This is just the brief version. And there are 3 large costings. The third, we also have new revenue by just canceling all the subsidies to oil and gas. But we have the third largest costing, I'm trying to find it, is for infrastructure. We're going to take 1% of the GST and give it to the municipalities for housing and infrastructure improvements that are required. That is, in the first year, $8 billion in the first year. And I think, Deb, you said it was 10 billion over how many years? 2 billion over 10 years. Well, we're giving 8 billion in the first year, and it will continue. That goes only up as cost of inflation goes up. We also have, I'm just going to try to read this. It's just very difficult, and I'm going to hear a bell. I'll just try my hardest. The things that will affect you in infrastructure is also going to be a $3 billion expenditure per year for infrastructure to protect Canadians from any disasters like flooding and forest fires and other things. We will be making affordable the construction of housing by making land available, and that land cannot be on a floodplain. We also will be increasing funding to the municipalities for buffers and for taking land that might be already deemed buildable out because the floodplains are probably exceeding what it was for Hurricane Hazel. So we can't build on those, and some people have been starting to. I will just say that part of infrastructure is housing. Part of it is also a fast, rapid transit, so you can relax on your commute, and it'll be faster and safe and emissions-free.
Okay, thank you to the candidates for that. We'll now move on to the segment where members of the public can ask questions of the candidates. So I'll just outline the rules for that. Guests may line up the microphone here. Each may ask one question up to 30 seconds long. There's a time limit, and we want to allow as many people as possible to ask questions, so please refrain from making a speech, and please ensure your questions are concise. State your question clearly. The focus is on asking clear questions of the candidates. Guests may direct their questions to one or more specific candidates. However, all candidates will have equal opportunity to answer should they choose to answer the question. Candidates may indicate to the moderator if they would like to give an answer. if they would like to give an answer. Sorry, the moderator will specify the order for answers and will seek to vary the order of each question. Answers from each candidate may be up to 1 minute maximum. Bell will be rung at 45 seconds, 15 seconds before a minute is up. Time to wrap up the answer. So, do we have any members of the public that would like to ask some questions? And if you could let me know who you're directing that question to.
I can hear you, Rick.
Hi, my name is Julie Melton. I've been a resident of King Township for almost 22 years. And it's mostly directed to Deb, just from hearing one of her comments. Why do you want economic growth in tandem with environmental preservation? Because more jobs don't more jobs mean more people, more housing, more traffic. More roads, more construction, more air pollution, more cement parks, more baseball diamonds that are cement with steel stadiums for people to watch. It just seems like there's so much cement. When you increase jobs, economic conditions, it's the environment that suffers. The green space suffers. The heat rises from all the cement. Thank you. Okay, I'm not one that is totally bound on a growth all the time, because the planet is limited and growth is going to be a challenge. It's not unlimited. We have a constrained planet. However, for Canada, we do have a very large land, and if we want more services and more supports for people, that comes with growth. All right, so that's kind of the conundrum you've got. If you want to be able to give more to people, you need to be able to grow. More services come from growth in the company, but you cannot do that without considering the environment and making sure that you're not drawing down the environment. And there is a way for us to live. We have to find this way, and there is a way for us to grow without destroying our environment. So that's the relationship that we're trying to set up for success for Canada. Okay?
And you'd like to address that?
How much time do I have now? Very short. Okay, so we have to rethink our model of economy. Deb alluded to, or she said, that we have a limited amount of resources, which makes it a challenge to grow the economy. That's a halfway answer in my view, Deb. We've gone past overusing the planet's resources, and our model has to be rethought. Now, we won't be the only ones. The future economy is going to be that model. Many other countries, first world countries in the OECD, are on their way. We're not going to be the only ones. If we continue thinking we have to do things the way we always have, we will be out of step in the future economy, and it's not an environmental issue. This is a security issue. It's the security of our future economy, the security of our children and our grandchildren. I would also like to add to the other question, because I found the page finally.
Maybe I'll say this out loud.
We might be on the same page.
Yeah,
Back and forth,
if the candidates are both agreeable and the moderator is, I think we could move to a minute and a half responses.
I was going to
Or
say
even two. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
That would be great.
Yeah, I
Can we
think.
get that minute now? I'd like to answer that.
I think the original format was set up for more candidates.
Yes.
We're going to have a lot more time, so I think.
I did a 2-minute intro, not forgetting it was 4.
So we can go on to the next question, or I'll allow some latitude for the candidates to further answer that last question. If you would like, sure.
Yeah.
1 minute more, yeah.
Okay. So Anne, I'm just listening to Anne, and I'm thinking, the problem is we don't have an isolated Canada. We have a world, okay? And there's a lot going on, and we need to do it in conjunction with that world. And a lot of people want to come to Canada, and we could say no, right? But there's a problem. We may end up, we are already over 2 degrees up the north. We're already seeing that. It was like this summer was insane up there. I've had the opportunity to go up, and the impacts are real. But we also might end up with a climate in the southern part of Canada that is more habitable than countries that are going underwater and other areas that are going to be parched. So this is, wow. So whatever we do, and this is part of doing it in conjunction with other countries, and you can see the growth that's going on in other countries, we need to power the transition. You can't do that without some growth. Thank you.
You're implying that the economy grows with people, and it does, because we absolutely use too much stuff, each of us, and that's what we have to change. All right? And we do need to have immigrants, and we need to be prepared that we will have more environmental refugees or immigrants, because they will be coming from places they can't survive anymore. Poorer countries don't have an infrastructure where to get your food at the Coppas or the No Frills. No, I was thinking the one past the No Frills. Eloro. To get your food at Eloro, they have to go down to the Toronto terminal to get it, to bring it back. We have to cut that out. We have to improve our local hubs. I have a ton here. Someone asked me about farming, please. We want to protect farmland.
I know, you hit it hard.
Was that 15 seconds or was that it?
That's it.
It'll be 2 minutes.
Okay, I also wanted to point out that there's going to be a national forest strategy renewal, where instead of looking at commercial interests, we'll be just having trees planted.
Okay, if we get another question from the public, I'm going to make an executive moderator decision here. We're going to go to 3 minutes.
Thank you for that.
Please ask your questions.
Okay, my question is for Deb Schultz, and I think you know what's going to be coming.
Not really.
Well, we've had
Maybe
discussions.
pipeline, is that?
But full disclosure, I am a volunteer for the Green Party in this riding. So, okay, here's my question. In 2015, Justin Trudeau promised a Liberal government that would be open and transparent. But in the SNC-Lavalin scandal, we saw the Liberal majority on the Justice Committee shut down the investigation twice. We also saw the Ethics Committee decide to shut.
I got the question.
Okay, my question, I could go on with other examples, but my question is, do you believe that the Trudeau government has met its promise in 2015 to be open and transparent, especially with SNC-Lavalin? Thank you.
I would not use SNC-Lavalin as the example of what we've done to open for transparency and improve the government. There is so much that we've done, and you can just look at the Senate and the changes that Trudeau's made on the Senate, and the fact that he gave the mandate letters of the ministers for the first time publicly, so that everybody in Canada would know what he asked the ministers to deliver for him in cabinet and in their term. These are things that he's done, and yes, there's been mistakes made, there's no question, and you and I have had a long conversation, but that conversation was an hour and a bit, okay? And then we had a second one for about 45 minutes. So there's no way, and no, it was an honor and a privilege to have that chance to have a chat and share the thoughts with you, but I don't think I can do this subject justice in 3 minutes or now 2. But what I want to say, a DPA, a deferred prosecution agreement, is what our partners in the international world are using now to hold companies to account, because they saw that crashing companies in their countries were not helping, it wasn't solving the problem, it wasn't bringing those to justice, because often those that need to be brought to justice were already gone. So then you're just crashing the company. Asked the Minister of Justice to design a DPA framework for Canada to be competitive with the partners around the world that we are trying to bring more social justice to the way companies operate. And I worked at Bombardier, so I have a good sense of what goes on out there, okay? So we need to do that, but we need to do it so that we're not making our companies in Canada, holding them to a different level of account than what England and the States are doing. He asked the Minister of Justice to design a DPA framework to deal with this exact issue, and guess what? She delivered something that could not be used for this issue. So you can understand there was a frustration. How it was dealt with was not dealt with well. He did not try to put money in his pocket. He did not actually try to bully her, but those underneath him did not act properly, and it was interpreted to be bullying on her part. There were lots of faults on her part, and I'm not going to point back and forth at faults, but what this is a fundamental breakdown in communication and relationships. And it went sideways. And that's never a good thing between a prime minister and a minister. She's a good person, and he's a good person. This did not go well, and I can get into all the details, but that's probably all I have. How much time do I have? And when the ladies revealed this to the paper, rather than bringing it to caucus, they betrayed the trust of caucus, and caucus asked the Prime Minister to remove them from caucus because they couldn't trust them anymore. They wouldn't share what we were talking about in confidence with the papers. And that was unfortunate and very sad. We lost two good people, and it wasn't good. And we lost, in essence, one public servant and one in the minister's office, Prime Minister's office stepped down because they did not act accordingly. Thank you.
Deb, do you know how many times the UK has used the DPA that they have?
I think they tried once.
Once. How many years have they had it?
But how many times have they brought any company to justice? You tell me. Once.
They've only used it one step in a longer than 1 year.
How many companies?
Why? Because they have the same requirements that was put in ours. The company is supposed to be self-reporting. We made a mistake. We found out that something was wrong. We fired him. He's no longer working for us. Here's all the information. Come and, invites the law in the RCMP in our case. And then when they're charged, they're then qualifying for EPA perhaps. I'm tired of hearing it that we have to do the same as the others when they have the same requirements. And the UK uses it very, very rarely, if at all. Once I think, yes. So you made it sound like Jody Wilson-Raybould did that on purpose. She was modeling it after what was good practice. That aside, what I hear in your response, Deb, is the Prime Minister wanted this done and he told her to do it. I thought it was. I thought it was along those lines. And this is part of our problem, people. We have had 3 things wrong in the last 30 years or more, but in the last 30 years it's cost us a gentle, easy transition to the world and the way of living that we need to do to save our future. Now we have to do it in a hurry, and that is the Prime Minister's office. Used to be people paid civil servants to be office managers for the Prime Minister. And one of the many promises that Mr. Trudeau Jr. has broken was to reduce the size and influence of the PMO that he knew his father had made too large. And everyone criticized it. When they got into power, the Conservatives made it bigger. We elect in our democracy a representative, and it is in the House of Commons and in the Senate and in committee that our government is supposed to run, not decisions made in the PMO. There's too much power for the Westminster parliamentary system. We do not have the checks and balances they have in the United States. A Prime Minister can do a heck of a lot. So I'm trying to say, well, things would be a lot worse down there, wouldn't they, if they didn't? We don't have an impeachment process. Our version of impeachment is when the Prime Minister doesn't prorogue government, as Mr. Harper had, to avoid a vote against his government. Our impeachment process is for the MPs that represent all of us to vote down the government or vote against a Prime Minister who's got himself too big for his boots. And we don't have that when they close down, when they don't show up. The power of our people's representatives, the House of Commons, that power has gone farther and farther, too much to the Prime Minister's office.
Unlike most, I'm actually looking forward to a minority government because people are going to have to play nice. And whether it's a conservative or a liberal minority government, there's going to be a lot of power in either the NDP or the Green Party. I'd like to know how you're going to play nice.
Are you directing that to any particular candidate, or?
have first the idea that we'd like to try to bring to whoever, if it's not us, form a government. And that is an old idea of the Greens. It's modeled on the Australian model. It's called the Council of Canadian Governments. And that's the federal government, the provincial territorial governments, municipalities represented, as well as Indigenous government, the Inuit and Métis First Nations. And that is one way that we can help make sure that nonpartisanship is the way we work. We go straight through all the levels of government and include in the table. So that and the recommendation of the Green Party is to form a inner cabinet, which was done last time in the Second World War. When you're going to do something huge, Mr. Mulroney, for instance, when he would go in his former progressive conservative, when he, and also I think Mr. Chrétien, when they go to make deals and trade deals and long-term contracts, they take people from all the parties because he might not be, or their party might not be in government next time, and so everyone needs to be agreed and on board from the start, and that hasn't happened in a while. So we would have a inner cabinet that would be dedicated primarily to the crisis and the emergency that's facing us. If you watch Elizabeth May in the House of Commons, you will see how she models it for all of us Greens. And what you're seeing here is a frustration that is, I think, felt by many others who have known about this for some time. And although I didn't vote Liberal, I did hope that that was right in trusting in the government doing what they said they would do. So I feel disappointed, and that's what you're sensing. I have great respect for all the members of Parliament, all the people that have gone in it for the right reasons. What I don't respect is making short-term decisions that are based on getting back into government again and being re-elected instead of thinking in the long term and thinking what's best for the people. And that's what we do. We stick our policies are based on fact. You have to think long term, 7 generations, and you have to stick to the facts, and then we can talk about what we do about it. That's what we should. It was Preston Manning out west who said in 2015, and he's been saying it since, it's of course we have to tax carbon, of course we have to put a price on carbon. We should be having a debate about how it's done.
So much to say. We did have a bit of a debate about how it was done. In fact, we worked for a year to plan it with the provinces, territories, and all those involved to make sure that we had cooperation. And unfortunately, the governments have changed, and they're pulling that support away. So while there, as a government, the Liberal government has worked very hard to do it right and to do it cooperatively, we don't have all people at the table trying to do following the same rules. And I'll just give an example. So I was the chair, the privilege of being the chair of the Environment Committee, and for the first 2 reports, we had unanimous reports. We worked very, very hard to get unanimous reports. It was the first time in 10 years that there was unanimous reports that came out of the Environment Committee, because there was a give and take. You cannot just bull in on everything you want to do. You have to listen to the concerns from the other parties, and you have to adapt what you're trying to do and try to get them on board. Those reports are delivered, and when you do a unanimous report from committees, the government cannot ignore it, because all parties are telling them this is what they want done, and they often adopt it, and in those 2 reports they did. Right after that happened, King-Vaughan leader, and he ripped the guys off of our committee that were working cooperatively with us to try to get unanimous reports so we could get the government to do what we were trying to get them to do, and to take the recommendations from all of the specialists that came to advise us, and we would put that in the report and we would work that up. He ripped them off the committee, and he put pit dogs on the committee to make sure that all of the work we tried to do was not going to progress, and that we could not get another unanimous report through that committee in the rest of the years. And another example, you got a minute every month to stand up in the House as an MP and laud your community or say something important to you. Every single one of the Conservative ones in the last year were scripted by the Central Party, and they were dictated to say the attack stuff that they were being asked to do in the House. They lost their ability to speak on behalf of their communities. So while we were trying to be cooperative, and we worked very hard to do that in the beginning, it became very clear that that wasn't going to work. So we had to start employing things that we never wanted to do, time allocation and everything else, because we could not get things through the House. They were going to delay everything, and when we got it through the House, they would delay it in the Senate. So you can dream of cooperation in the House.
I'm not the one who asked the question, Deb.
You can hope for it, and we hoped for it, and we worked hard to do it. But you have to have the other parties willing to work with you to do that. And at the moment, in a minority government, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get anything done. And we can't afford another 4 years of non-action, fighting over, because we haven't got a majority, to get it done. So I don't think a minority is going to be our answer if we want climate change to be progressed. Thank you.
Do we have any other members of the public? Yes,
Ma'am, Mrs. Rani, what I'm tired of is the holier-than-thou attitude amongst governments, amongst politicians, amongst everyone in society, thinking that making mistakes is not acceptable, but they are. It's part of a learning process. Yes, he's made a lot of mistakes, Prime Minister Trudeau. Yes, every person, every politician in power.
You need a question?
The question, there's no question, it's a comment.
No, well, this is her question, but.
Okay, but anyway, I'll come back when is there a moment where we can make a comment?
If you can formulate a question.
Through it?
You can come back, there's another gentleman that has.
Okay, here's my question.
We do
Name
have
one person who has not made an error. The process has to be in learning from mistakes and looking at the positives, looking at what he or she has done well, working on that and expanding from that. I'm a retired teacher of 35 years.
You're making a speech again.
Yeah, well, bad for that.
Was there a question out there?
The question is, name one person in history who has not made mistakes in power.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm John Kell. I live on Keel on a farm where we do some farming north of King City. It's very hard to ask a question in such a short time when some questions need more background. I don't want this question to come out as a criticism. I like to see Canada doing well. I like to see people in Canada doing well. And I was a supporter of up until a few years ago, I was a supporter of putting oil out to the West Coast and shipping it.
Question.
That's not fair.
Those are the rules. Those are the games.
Well, my question has to do with the pipeline through BC. And I would like to know if Mr. Trudeau is still thinking along the same lines. I read where China is building 50 nuclear transactions, what do we call them? Nuclear power plants. And I've been to China. You can't stand the air there, and so they're trying to cut down. They're not going to be using the oil that they have been using.
Do you have a question?
We all want the oil to dry up. Are we still going to pursue this actively, and why would we pursue it when we're trying to reduce?
So is it safe to say that your question is, should the federal government continue to pursue the Trans-Canada Pipeline?
That's probably the way.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So the pipeline, I was not happy about the pipeline, okay? Because because I feel very much like you do. It will be a stranded asset if we are successful at doing the transition around the world, and we have to be successful. If we're not, well, the outcome's not very good. So I do believe in the long run, it's going to be a stranded asset. That's not a good thing to be investing in. However, what happened was, we were at the beginning in 2016 with the provinces, territories, Indigenous people, and businesses and environmentalists. And Alberta, Rachel Notley, made a negotiation. That's what it was for a year, negotiating. What are we going to do? What is each province going to do to meet their requirements? And she negotiated for her to do the transition that she needed to do, that she needed the money from the revenue from the pipeline to be able to do that change. There are many other ways to do it, but that's what Rachel Notley negotiated, and that's the plan that she had for her province that her people had bought into. So Trudeau bought into the negotiation of, okay, if that's what you need, then we will support it, okay? Because we need you on board, because you're like the second largest emitter, and we need you to be at the table, and if that's what you're asking us to do, then that's what we're going to do, because we need you there. He did that with all the other provinces, BC, Ontario. We had a good plan here. Unfortunately, she did not get back in, and Jay said, well, let's go back. Then Indigenous people and the court, they took, our approval, which was through the NEB. And by the way, we have a brand new process, and I was proud to be on the committee that worked on changing C-16, or making C-69, which was new rules. It got gutted a bit in the Senate, but it did get through, and it's better than it was, and we've embodied Indigenous rights in there and all sorts of things, so I'm very proud of that. There's a lot of work. Anyway, getting back to it, it went to court, and they said you did not consult properly, and while the NEB process always says you just account for what's in your project and not what's external to your project, they said there are effects that are external that you need to account for, and that was the whales and other initiatives there, but mostly the whales, the killer whales. So we went back and we said, okay, you know what, we will go back and we will do it again, and we will do the consultation right, and we will do it not under the NEB, we will do it separately, and we will do what we need to do on the coast. All right, I'll have to cut if that's the bell, but it's up to you guys, it's up to the moderator, and then we'll give the time to end. So what ended up happening was, we got through that process, we put a significant change on how we deal with shipping, not just on the boats that are going to be for this oil, but for all the other oil that's going through there. All the other shipping has to change their rules so that we can protect those whales and their habitat. And so there's a significant amount of work that's gone into making sure that this project is benefiting all the other traffic that's going through there. Second thing is, Indigenous peoples were at the table saying, you heard us, but you never answered our questions. And there is a difference between your elders in the First Nations and sometimes the younger people that are looking for economic development. All right, so they're not all in harmony. TransCanada, Trans Mountain, they said, this is just too complicated, we're pulling out. So now we had the situation, we're in the middle of the process, they're pulling out. Alberta needed it, Rachel Notley was still in, she's still saying, listen, I need this for my transition. So that's what happened. We ended up buying it, because not to keep it, but to buy it, to make sure that we could then transition it to the First Nations who were asking us to do that. And so they could get involved, and they could get some of the benefit. Rachel Notley could get the benefit she needed in her province, and that it would move forward. So that's why we ended up buying it. Every single dollar that is going to be profit from that, and every single taxation that we get from that is going into going into power a transition to a greener, cleaner economy, because it will be a stranded asset if we're successful, but we're using the funds to power that transition. Thank you. Oh,
Let's say 4 minutes.
Did you say at some point, I drifted, I'm sorry, but did you say that the intention was that there are First Nations people that want to buy the pipeline?
Yes, there absolutely are.
So you're going to leave it with policy was, well, we're going to patch together put together this patchwork of different provinces have different ways of putting price on carbon. And when they figure it all out, we'll just knit it together like a quilt. I'm trying to put it in a short, more metaphor. And ours, the Green Party, says, this is a federal jurisdiction. This is a federation that hasn't had leadership at the top in a long time. We have a leader who knows the levers and the weight that we have in a federal government to ensure things happen coast to coast to coast. And we have now since been held up in the courts where the provinces were challenging the federal government's ability to impose now a tax. Now, I've said this before, we talked about interprovincial barriers. Wouldn't it be nice if Canada had one taxing on carbon system, coast to coast to coast? What if you're shipping across the country? What if you have a business that's in one province or another, and one is cap and trade and one is a different price? Imagine the paperwork nightmare for you. So it is something that could have been done a lot faster had the Liberals listened to the Green Party policies, which is simply to say you have to take the strength you have as a federal government and make it right, make it so across the provinces. Yes, sometimes there's going to be some provinces upset, but then they'll sue and they'll lose, and that's what happened in the long run. It took 3 years to get anywhere, and we're stuck. So I do think it's a stranded asset, and I think it's a shame. It's the first I've heard of plans to sell it off to the Indigenous people, the young ones that don't maybe know better or something. Some of them want it, not all of them. And it's not 4.5, what is it, million, I'm getting all confused now, but it's 10 to 13 billion, I believe, because it has so much work to do. It's an old pipe. So it's not as cheap as you think, and that's costing from the government itself, National Revenue, Natural Resources Canada. It makes no sense, absolutely. If you go into the kitchen and you've got a spill of water on the floor and the tap dripping, what's the first thing you do? You turn the tap off, and then you clean up the spill, right? You turn the tap off, so you're not sitting there mopping up water while it's still spilling on the floor. And that's status quo thinking, and that's why we're in trouble. Has had the integrity on this file for all this time. They've been telling you the truth. The problem is the media might not have picked up on it, and you didn't really hear us. But you're hearing us now. Elizabeth May isn't the only one with all this experience. I've been to conventions. We have a lot of people who have experience in government and running government as senior civil servants that want to see this done right. We have to do it. It's not about what's politically possible, which is what I hear from the Liberals and the Conservatives and the NDP, because they're okay with LNG. What has been politically possible is taking us in the wrong direction where we have to go. According to the world's scientists, Canada needs us to lead us back to a better quality of life for everyone.
Give a show of hands of how many questions there might be waiting out there. Sir, would you like to ask your question?
Hello, my name is Bob. I've been a resident in this area only since April. And so I came up because I wanted to find out what's going on in town. It's really hard not to ask a question without making a few comments, but this relates to marginalized people in our society. And I know we've made improvements. The most marginalized in our community, in our communities, in our nation, are the Indigenous peoples. There were many promises made, and quite honestly, I'm not sure what really has been done to improve the plight of our Indigenous people when I see every day that so many of them live with clean water advisories. What have you done, and what are you going to do?
Okay, there is, and you probably hear the Prime Minister say, there's nothing more important to him than the relationship with Indigenous people, and he really does embody that. There are decades and decades of problems and issues that we have created over the way that we have dealt with our Indigenous people in Canada. That is not going to get solved overnight. But what he did right away was he split the Indigenous, the file, and he said, I'm going to have one minister working on rights and treaties and all of the other elements there, and I'm going to have another one working on the programs, the infrastructure, delivering the results on the ground. So there's so much to do. I need two ministers to do it. All right. Jane had the infrastructure, and just so that you know, 85 of the boil water advisories have been solved. And this is not throwing money at communities like was done before, okay? It's about getting on the ground, finding which ones have the capacity to, if we're going to construct a proper resource, to then be able to maintain it and be able to run it. And that means you have to train people. That means you have to have that level of person interested in doing it within the community. Because we used to just fly people up and have other people go there and manage it. And we know that doesn't work. And then when they don't want to be there, they don't belong there. They need First Nations people and Indigenous people to be there looking after this infrastructure. And so it is about working through the capacity with the communities in getting the infrastructure they need, getting the housing, and we have earmarked a tremendous amount of money towards housing, and that is coming, and it is on the ground working through those challenges. But you know what it's like to get a house up. It doesn't happen. You can't build thousands and thousands and thousands of houses in an instant. So we are making progress, but it does take time. So 85 have been done, and I think there's 58 or 57 that still have to be done by 2021, and 2021, and they will be done because the groundwork has been laid. So I just want you to know, in the legislation that we've been passing for the last 4 years, we have been embedding Indigenous rights. We have been fought every step of the way by the Conservatives to not have that in there, because it's an obligation for the future Canadians to have them at the table and do that negotiation. They've been trying to cut them out of that, and we've been stitching them in to every legislation that we're having, respecting their way of doing things and Indigenous knowledge, and making sure that's part of the decision-making process. So we are making significant strides, and I have had the pleasure of working with chiefs, and they have come back and said, we hope the Liberal government gets back in, because there isn't another government that has done as much in 4 years as the previous governments have done for Indigenous people. Thank you.
And it's sad, isn't it, that there hasn't been a government that's done better. We in the Green Party fully support the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations. The first chapter in our platform, where are you all there? First chapter in our platform, which is, if you take up pages, 60 pages, take up pictures. It has 3 subjects: treaties and land claims, respecting Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination, and cultural revitalization and healing. And also throughout all our costings, our special setting aside things for up north challenges, which includes transportation, includes access to healthcare and affordable housing. For instance, I'm looking at, I was hoping for a farm question. I expected Cal to be giving a farm question. And we're going to be building greenhouses and towers. What they mean by towers, they mean hydroponic towers in the north, because they have a lot of sunshine half of the year, and they can have fresh food that they can grow, and it costs so much otherwise. So that's just one example of how it's scattered throughout. I will say that we wish to uphold Canada's fiduciary responsibility, fulfill Canada's responsibilities in agreements, honor treaties, and respect all rights of Indigenous peoples, including their inherent rights of self-government. That we also respect the UN's Declaration of Rights, Human Rights for Indigenous Peoples, and we fully support all of that. We put in our policies the Indigenous people at the helm. I would like to say that we have some funding here, and I'll be as farming. Here we go. We have $10 million a year for the first 4 years aside to consult with Indigenous people on repealing the Act. The Indian Act is still there, folks. It's still, I can't remember how to say the Latin, terra nullius. Anybody here a Latin person? This is the attitude that is still in the Indian Act, where those people weren't considered people when we first came here. This colonization, this doctrine of superiority has to be repealed, and we'll do it with their guidance. We're going to invest in their infrastructure, $750 million a year for the next however many years it takes. $2 billion to honor the ruling of the Human Rights Tribunal in the matter of unequal treatment of Indigenous children. That's in the first year, and we expect we'll get that done in the first year. Protection of Indigenous languages at risk is $10 million, and this is fully costed. Yes, we'll be running a deficit balance budget in the first 2 years, but we have plans. Third year will be near balance. Fourth year will pay off the debt. The Liberals do not have a plan to come to a balanced budget, and this costing I can talk about if you want to know how we get new revenue.
Who next has a question? Yes, sir.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Richard Corley. I'm a resident of Kleinburg for a little over 50 years now. And thank you very much for being here tonight, both Deb and Ann. I was downtown last Friday at the Climate March, and thank you. And I think our children are to be applauded. The seriousness of this crisis, I don't believe our country has fully understood or is fully dealing with. And I feel in some respects in talking to both you, Ann, and Deb, that I'm speaking to the choir. But I'm very, very concerned that we may, by accident, in an election where we have three parties who are committed to doing things on climate change, and one party committed to the opposite, make a dreadful mistake through splitting the vote and end up with a government that continues the completely disastrous path taken by our former Prime Minister Harper. So I'd just like to ask you, and it's a particularly hard question for you, Ann, how we get to the right result and how we avoid the wrong result through vote splitting and having a party that would be disastrous for this country end up in power.
And who are not here.
Who are not here.
You write an article for your paper in Vaughan, please.
I'm sorry.
I'm not inviting anyone, but especially you, sir, who's from the Vaughan part of the writing of King Vaughan,
Yes.
to please, if you would, perhaps, let the people know in Vaughan, the Vaughan citizen, that their candidates did not.
I would be happy to do that.
Consider it.
Sir, have you directed that to any specific?
It was really directed to both, but probably more directly to Ann. Thank you.
Fear of the Conservatives has been driving a lot of people to vote strategic, and it can go the other way. Conservatives say fear of another party. Voting in fear is a fundamentally stinks. The very foundation of our democracy is when you vote for the person you think would best represent you and your values in government. When we don't do that, we really can't complain about what happens. We have not had a Green Party build up as a choice because of that. And if you don't vote for what you want, you'll never get it. I haven't met anyone who's told me they now voted Green and regretted it. I would like to add to your point about the splitting vote. We have yet to have, in modern recollection, we almost had it a few years back, the idea of a coalition. And it's not unheard of in Westminster parliamentary systems in the world, and coalitions can work. You don't have to dwindle it down to a two-party system and require some parties that may share quite a bit to meld into one, to be afraid of being, saying, unite the left against the right, unite the right against the left. We'll just end up with a two-party system like the States, I'm afraid, if we do that, and then we'll have no voice of reason at different times, because they'll be both more interested in bashing each other, a bunch of Judy Shermans, let's be sensible. think people should vote for what they believe, and I think especially in this election, and especially when I was there Friday, I didn't see you among the tens of thousands. And yes, hats off to our children. It's a very unfortunate thing that they're out there doing that. You know, the weight of the world on Greta Thunberg. It's pronounced Greta Thunberg, by the way, in Sweden. And all those young people, but you see, because they were given their truth, that they told the truth, they told the science, they've learned it, and they've given people, their parents have given them an opportunity to act on it. That's how they can cope, that's how they can stay okay, otherwise they fall into despair. I'm afraid we have to involve our children in our solutions. But I would say again, sir, wait and see the results of the election, and we go from there. We do not elect our prime minister, we elect our representative, who may or may not belong to a party and represent that party's platforms, meet with the candidates, and make a decision. But I do not see a worry, because if the majority of people on the left vote for someone on the left, which includes maybe a climate bloc, and that's not a left-right issue, by the way, climate. It's about having an economy and a sovereign country, let alone saving the future for the children. So the Green Party is actually quite fiscally conservative. I don't know if people realize that. We are. And then you see you have the other parties can decide on the coalition in the end. If the conservatives win and they won't do what they're supposed to do, or if anybody wins that won't do what they're supposed to do.
That's a tough question that you've asked, because, you know, pardon me?
I'm sorry, it could be vote by vote as well.
Well, fair enough. I have a lot of respect for Anne, and I have a lot of respect for the Green Party and Elizabeth May. And it was Elizabeth May, before she was in politics, that gave me the advice to get into politics. So I'm actually very friendly with Elizabeth May. I see her as a friend, and she sees me as a friend. And she's been working with me very closely on the committee when I was in Environment Committee. And we had her on come and be part of the committee. And I made sure she had a chance to speak at committee when she wanted to come and speak. She just needed to let me know. And I made sure that the Liberal Party gave her questions and gave her time, because I have tremendous respect for her. But this is a tough decision, because in this riding, and I think each person has to make the decision, there's no doubt I'd love to see more Greens in the House, and I'd love to see them have official status so they could actually get at the table with us. I'd love that. But we have to look at each riding by riding. And where the Greens have a really good chance to win, I hope people do go out and vote more Green, because I think the more we have that message of Green in the House, the better. And I really sincerely mean that. In this riding, though, I just want to bring people's attention to the last results. Liberals are 47.4, Conservatives were 44.2, and that was with the Conservative candidate not coming out to the debates and not getting a vote, okay? NDP was 6.5, and the Greens were 1.9. And Anne did a really good job, and I'm just letting you know that sometimes it's brutal. If we want a Conservative to run and be in this riding, representing this riding, and having a chance to sit at that table and fight for what she believes in, it is not the environment. So if we split the vote, it's so close, I won by 1,700 votes. It's very close. If we split the vote and people move across and they start voting elsewhere, and I lose some of the support I had before, I will not be your representative. And it's very likely to be the Conservative representative. And you can be sure that that person won't be given the leadership position I had as chair of the Environment Committee so that I could do the good work and get those reports. And there are things on the table that I laid the foundation for, and I can't wait to get back there and deliver them. Our CEPA, Canadian Environmental Protection Act, is 20 years old. It doesn't even hold a candle to the States and to Europe. We laid the foundation with a very big report, and the government has committed in their platform to deliver on that. I want to go back and deliver for Canadians a better better environment for toxics. I just got cancer, and I want to make sure that our kids don't have that legacy where more and more people We have a climate change crisis, and we need to do more, and I want to be back there doing that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I have a question.
I have nothing to say.
I have a question. Okay, I'm going to direct this one to Green Party. What's your message to young people feeling disenfranchised, unable to afford to buy a home of their own, living with their parents after graduating from college and university, and concerned about the impact of climate change on the environment, the economy, and their future?
Well, let's see, I'll speak for the Liberals that have said, I believe they're gonna give them longer to pay off their debts. They haven't. We're just not gonna have any debts. We're forgiving, it's the second largest costing item, and it's something that we need to do and we're overdue. Back in the day when you could get a good job and have a career with a high school education, that was free. Before that, it was enough to know to write and read and do some numbers. Now really we need a highly trained and well-informed workforce, and we need to eliminate tuition for post-secondary education, which includes, I'm happy to say, training for trades, apprenticeships, college and university. So we're forgiving that debt, and all the same, it's not easy living on $1,200 a year, which is, I think, the loan that you'll get with OSAP that you have longer to pay off. So we have a thing that it's called the guaranteed livable income, and it eliminates poverty in one fell swoop by simply streamlining how we administer all our social programs. The administration of helping people who need a hand is very costly. It's also less effective. Where this has been done in other countries, people get to work faster. It's more effective. So what we have is a system that probably won't cost any more. And if it costs a little more, it won't matter because it's more effective. They'll get to work. This is everyone. This is people born with disabilities or have disabilities. This is young people. This is people who are older. This is people who have mental health, addiction issues, autism, whatever it might be that's having a difficult time with the workforce. Guaranteed livable income is the cheaper way of doing a better job. And it's administered through the CRA, which we already have. So the bureaucracy for, applying for Happy Smiles, being a dentist for your kids over here, begging that you're poor, that you need some money for rent assistance over here. All those social workers that are doing paperwork can get back to talking to people. So there's that. As far as housing is concerned, we really need to get rental housing back up on board. And so we're going to be making land available, as I said, for affordable housing in municipalities. But we're also going to be incentivizing with tax, converting existing properties for rental. The CMHC, by the way, will be innovated to support co-op and shared housing because unfortunately it doesn't. We're going to provide rent supplements and shelter assistance as necessary, but the dedicated funding to the cooperative housing sector is also a big thing for students and the new grads. Income tax credit is also, as I'm just reading, affordability is going to be there to preserve our built heritage, and there's universal child care, which is going to close the gap between rich and poor. So if you're a young person who's got a child, having child care is an issue. There's more, I can go into all of it, but I got you. Was that 15 seconds? I didn't use 50 seconds between bells.
So the question was our kids and getting the housing they need, and this is a very complicated and challenging issue that we've been struggling to solve, and we're not going to do it alone. And I think some of our kids are beginning to realize that the kind of housing and the way that we've lived is not very sustainable. And so carrying on and just building more houses and building it further out is not the answer. Although the development industry is pushing very heavy that that's the answer that we need, and somehow we got to find a way to make that affordable, and it's just not going to be affordable. So we're reaping the rewards of an unsustainable housing system, just letting all this sprawl happen. And what are we building? 5,000 square foot homes? I don't even know what to say. And we're building them out in the middle of nowhere, so there's no transit, and everybody, you know, anyway. So what we've done is we said, look, we have to build smarter communities. Our kids want to be where the action is. They don't want to have a car either, many of them don't. They want to be where they work, they want to play, and they want to live. And so we need to build smarter communities, and we need to put the housing where all this good stuff is, which is building it more dense. We also need to build more rental, because not everybody's going to be able to own their own home, especially not at the prices that they are today. And the previous government invested nothing. They took CMHC out of the game, which meant there was no way to get income or money to be able to start building rental housing, because where are you going to get the startup money to start building the building? So everybody just built condos, because you get your startup money to build the building from the deposits. So we've got the CMHC back in the game so that they are now helping organizations to build rental housing, and not just rental. What about cooperatives? There's all sorts of very creative ways in other countries that they build housing, and they're much more supportive housing, and we've been doing some of that for those with disabilities and those with autism and Downs. They can live healthy, happy lives, but they need some support at different times. So there's different kind of models that have been done around the world and studying them. When it comes to the social safety net, we've also been consolidating. There were so many different programs. If you met this particular criteria, consolidated them. We put this village tax credit is just one rather than three. Canada Child Benefit, all those tax boutique tax credits, put them in one. So we've been trying to simplify, because you're absolutely right, there's a tremendous waste of resources in administration. So we've been going through trying to simplify the system, and we have moved almost 1 million Canadians out of poverty with the work that we've been doing. Thank you.
Debbie mentioned it earlier, how the provincial government has really restricted the ability of the TRCA to make any environmental assessment. I was wondering how each of you, as part of the federal government, could, or if it's even possible, how you would prevent the provincial government from the restrictions that they have placed on the Ministry of Natural Resources and the TRCA to help protect our environment, which they have not been able to do.
Yeah, this almost makes me weep, okay, because I told you I came out of my job back in 2004 to kind of strengthen the system and make sure that we had a better, stronger rules, the PPS, all these things I was involved in strengthening to make it better for the environment as we move forward in development. And it's being tagged as red tape. How many have heard that? We're going to get rid of the red tape because red tape's bad. Well, red tape is concerns for the environment, right? And they just cut all of that. The problem we have is that we are a confederation. There are federal jurisdictions and there are provincial jurisdictions. And unfortunately, land use and those rules are entirely within provincial legislation. So we have no jurisdiction. We do when it comes to toxics, and that's why I said we want to strengthen some of our rules, and air quality, those kind of things we can. And we can help, but we can't enforce him to change the way he's behaving when it comes to land use. That's a jurisdiction that he's got. What I can say is how very, very important it is to pick a government that has the vision and the values that you have, so that you don't end up with this kind of mismatch on where the government's going at the local level. It just makes me weep. It really does, because they're unraveling 20 years of hard work from so many people. And once you get a precedent for something to be done, which is what they're looking for right now, they just changed. It used to be it's called LSAT now, the LPAT. Once they get that through, even one, all the other developers in the GTA, in Southern Ontario and Ontario, will be using that precedence to be able to do that elsewhere. And so we're going to start seeing this rolling wave of development where it shouldn't be. And so I'm really, really deeply depressed about it. And unfortunately, there's no direct way that we can do it. But we can try with funding. But in terms of those rulings, we won't be able to change those rulings, but we might be able to encourage better behavior with funding. That's what we try to do at the federal level, is how can we influence their decisions by, we've got some money, but you gotta kind of do something the way we'd like you to do it. And so it's a little bit of give and take, but that's how we try to do it, is with money. Okay, thanks. I forgot the question.
Oh, you got it. The TRCA and the province and the rules.
Right.
What would you be able to do?
Well, again, the federal government under the Green Party will be, through the Canada Investment Bank, providing the funds required to increase buffers to do that. And I should think that they will be at the table of Council of Canadian Governments, trying very hard to make sure that the conservation authorities can administer many of the things that are there to watch over the money at the same time. So responsibility is with the government at any level. But the reason why we have to go past the premier system and get to talk to the municipalities in our Council of Canadian Governments is because we have sometimes a premier that is not in line with what the local level needs. We've got top down and bottom up. The middle's kind of a problem at times. So they're at the table, but they wouldn't be in the majority. And that's actually why that will work. It's worked in Australia. So it would have to be federal leadership, which we've lacked for a while. The chutzpah to deal with the problems that are systemic that we have. Yes, we're building houses twice. We're living in houses twice as big as they were when I was young, and the families are half as big. But they're also not insulated well. So there's a whole bunch of issues, and you have to look at the whole picture. You have to have a vision. So if you were to do a jigsaw puzzle, and you had all the pieces in front of you, it's a geometric puzzle, you don't know, all the bright colors are turned up, but you don't have the picture on the box, it's a lot harder for you to put that puzzle together. The Greens have a picture on the box, we have a vision, we know how this world is going to be looking like, and how Canada is going to fit into it, how Canada needs to be working together, and all the details. And you don't have to done 4 years as an MP to not know the details. There are people in our party who know, and one of those pieces is to say there's a thing called the Canadian Building Code, and that's a federal thing. So the Ontario Building Code works under that. We hope to be changing some things in the Ontario Building Code, especially around making the city don't have to pay very much for heating them when they're built. So retrofitting the buildings as well. But I'm not answering your question directly, because I think the issue is to sit down with all levels of government and work all together, and that includes conservation authorities. We have committed to funding for those buffers and for the monitoring of wetlands, wild spaces, and forests.
We've got past by 5 minutes our time frame. Okay, we have until 9:30 to be out of this building, so I'll offer 2 more questions, so go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Kevin Barber, resident of King City for 18 years. Greta had a lovely protest last week. I don't see any of her people here though. We're all a little older, anyway, that's just a comment. Talk about environment, talk about planning and development, without raising any eyebrows, but raising the river levels. I think it speaks quite well. The development going up on Jane Street just speaks well of the development planning of Jane Street, north of King Road to the right, lovely meadow, going right down to the Humber River. Talking about floodplains, that's just an example, that's not a question. My question would be, and a comment first, up near Perry Sound, I've got a place up there, and last week a neighbor of mine had a cow running down the road with a chain and a tire. The chain was embedded in his neck, and the tire dragging along the road. I believe it could be a provincial ruling recently on the SPCA and cutting of the powers. Well, there was no one available at the SPCA to have this dealt with. The police were called. It may have been dealt with. And furthermore, there's been a challenge just in the courts now. It was in the paper yesterday about the SPCA and the railways. Any of these officers, SPCA, all these officers, they're challenging any of the powers they have. But my question to you, or what as a federal party, like our provincial government is stripping powers that have been in here in our area forever. Thank you.
Okay, I'm a very strong advocate for animal rights, and so I was part of the animal welfare caucus to try and see if we could bring in legislation that would make animals not property, that they would be sentient and therefore they wouldn't be deemed as property. We had a lot of pushback actually from Jody Wilson-Raybould, who was the Minister of Justice and didn't want to work with us on making that happen. What we did get through are some changes in transportation rules, but not as good as we wanted. There's a lot of pushback against it with the industry. What we got is we got shark finning banned, we got cetacean captivity banned. These are just little steps along the way, but what I want to try to do, and we want to do as our committee caucus, we want to try to get animals to be considered as not property. They need more rights. The problem was we had the farming industry and those that deal with animals, and they're very worried. And we got hunters and trappers and everyone else kind of stacking up against us because they're very worried that if that rule changes, their business ends. Not so much farmers, but definitely trappers and hunters. So we've got a big problem to try to make that change, but I can tell you we are working very hard to try. We banned cockfighting and animal fighting and made that tougher. But the only way we're going to be able to save animals from this kind of abuse and this kind of disgusting behavior is to make them not property. They need to have rights, and at the moment they don't, and that's a problem. And at the provincial level, by taking the SPCA rules out and basically putting over to the police, they've gutted the ability for that little bit that we still had with the passionate people working at the SPCA. I've always supported them, and I'm again very frustrated with where our provincial government has been going on so many files. Yeah, exactly. So again, we have different levels, and it is a bit of a problem because we can't come in as a federal level and insert, but where we can is how people are held to justice, right? Like, what is the legislation? And right now, animals are property. So we have to get that changed, and that's the only way we're going to be able to really significantly move forward on animal protection. Thank you.
I think the best thing I could do would be to make it a private member's bill. To present that and have people watch their MPs vote it down, if that's what they're going to do it publicly. Not stop it in the cabinet, but get it forward. Whales, dolphins, I kind of support the world view that they are non-human persons. And they travel from country to country, and the world is working toward this, so we need to be in line with that as well. So there are other non-human persons like elephants, but we have you're talking about domestic animals and wild, but the wild animals are going to be disappearing. We're in the mass extinction right now, and in the next decades we'll be losing some of the iconic animals that you and I grew up watching on some or other native wildlife show. I can't remember that guy, Perkins, was it? Yeah. Yeah, what was and we've seen them animated. Well, we're going to see animals, children are going to see them in the zoos if that photograph's going to be animated on a Disney film, polar bear or something. So you know, it has to all be done, but right now there's a priority, and it's a climate emergency. And there's a lot to be done to get our house in order in the first few days, a few years. Setting up pharmacare, for instance. So I would say too that if I were to make it a private member's bill or try to push for that bill, I would probably put that off till the third year or fourth year in a new government, because we're going to have our hands full, and that's the priority, is saving the habitat for everybody and us. This is extremely serious. Status quo, playing government the way it's been done, it's not going to work, and partisan politics isn't going to work. Corporate influences have to stop. We have to do a paradigm shift. We really, really, really do. The way we live and the way we've been governing ourselves in Canada has led us to this point. I'm waiting for the bell. I'm upset today because I've heard from a conservative voter that he just found out because of Greta Thunberg what kind of state we're in, and he's Googled it and looked it up, and then he did listen to Margaret Thatcher in 1989 at the UN talk about the crisis we have, and the speech could be transplanted to today from our governments that we've had over the last 30 years. It's the same. And he's upset that he had to hear that from children.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Back has been waiting. Following that, we will have the closing comments from each candidate.
My name is Angelo Santorelli. I have a question, probably a little bit change the mood. I have a question. How do you propose to balance the budget and maybe reduce our debt? And I'm thinking mainly because of my children and my grandchildren. I know it's not a popular subject, but I think in the future it will definitely affect them. So that's my question. How is your government prepared to balance a budget without going into more and more debt that somebody down the line will have to pay? It may not be a crisis today, but when my grandkids get to my age, it will be a crisis for them. That's my question.
Are you directing that to any specific candidate? Both of you. Okay, who would like to take that?
The Green Party takes the debt very seriously, and it was, I think, $200 billion less 4 years ago or something. All right. That's the interest on top of it accumulated. We don't want to leave a social debt, an ecological debt, or an economic debt to our children. So we are fiscally conservative now. We have fully costed our platform with more points going through the Parliamentary Budget Office. And by the way, we don't give them the numbers and they verify them. We give them the details of our platform and they cost it. We accept their numbers. We have revenue changes. And I'll just give you the top three. We are going to be taxing financial transactions on the market, 0.5%. We had hoped it would be 0.2. That was when pharmacare came out being almost 3 times more than we had anticipated. And our numbers are reflected in the NDP's estimate, but we accept the PBO's numbers, which is $27 billion in the first year that we set it up after that. So that financial tax, we're also going to be increasing the corporate tax rate to 21% to match the USA. It was pretty low and then it got lower. And that idea of Mark Carney, the governor of the Bank of Canada, and now the Bank of England, said it doesn't work. You know, you want to stimulate the economy by taxing corporations less, thinking they'll turn around and hire more people, do more research, do more, hiring of skilled laborers and training of others. No, he said it just chinked around in their pockets for that rainy day. So that's what happened to it. It didn't stimulate the economy. It is known to be a failed model. So we will be taking the corporate tax rate as citizens they are to pay their fair share of taxes at 21%. that generates almost 13 billion. And the third, that was the second, the third most, the largest of revenue changes for input on this costing budget is a capital gains loophole is going to be closed. Expecting a bit of maybe, I don't know. But what we have is
residence tax?
capital gains on the stock market, on stock markets primarily, I think it is. I haven't had the chance to get the details on it. It'll be on the online soon. We will be taxing the e-commerce companies that do business here on the net and don't pay taxes. I'll stop there. There's about $3 billion in just canceling tax breaks and credits for oil and gas and exploration of oil and gas, coal. Yeah, I hear you. We're going to, the banks did very well and we'll be increasing the bank taxation, not to kill them, but just to pay their fair share. And this is what we have to do. So we've had to find a revenue, and in our first year, as I said, we will have a $65 billion deficit, which is within the 2 to 3% of the GDP. That when I asked Michael Wilson once, I was in a room, don't bother him anymore. I was in a room, and there were 3 finance ministers at the Coaching conference I attended some years ago. One was Jim Flaherty, who was the finance minister at the time. The other was former minister and Prime Minister Paul Martin, and the third one was Michael Wilson. He looked a little more approachable. I went over to Michael Wilson. He was a former progressive conservative finance minister, and I introduced myself. I said, I'm really just an engineer, and I don't know all these things too well. And before I could ask him a question, I said, I have a dumb question. He said, I don't know any engineers that ask dumb questions. He looked right through me, and I asked the question, doesn't matter what party you're on, how much of a deficit in an annual budget is okay? And he said, no, it doesn't matter what party you're on, because in finance, all the finance ministers are worth their salt. The numbers don't lie, and 2 to 3% of GDP is acceptable when it has to be. What we can't do is save that much. People don't like it when the government's saving money. So this is within that.
And we got to wrap.
It's 2.9 or 2.8 trillion. 2.3 trillion is our GDP for this year. It's estimated, and so we will be paying it down in the second, third, and fourth, and starting to pay off the debt.
Okay, I'm personally fiscally responsible. I don't take on debt that I don't plan on, well, I don't take on debt, except when I'm making a major investment in my future. And so when I bought my house, I took on debt, and I worked really hard to pay it off as fast as I could. I've done the same thing when I've needed a car. You know, if I've had to borrow, I borrow quickly and pay it off. What we have here is an environment where for 10 years there wasn't a lot of investment done in Canada, and so we've seen an infrastructure deficit. We see a transition that we need to do for Canada, for the economy. We've talked about it. We've talked about how important it is. It doesn't come for free. There's a lot of investment that needs to happen if we're going to transition an economy off of the oil and gas and to different technologies and different futures. We have to invest in people, we have to invest in companies, we have to invest in science, and technology, and innovation. That has to be paid for if we're going to help, all right? So we have a re-engineering that we're doing, and Anne talked about it. She talked about the fact that trickle-down economics wasn't working for Canada. For the last 10 years, the Conservatives are piling on the debt, but we weren't growing the economy. We have not done that, okay? We have not done a balanced budget, agreed, but we have realized that the interest rate is at the lowest that it's been in a very long time, and it's stayed down, and it looks like it's not going up anytime soon. So if you're going to buy something or invest, you're going to do it when the interest rates are low and you've got your best buying power. So what we plan on doing, or what we are doing, is investing in people, investing in the transition in technology and in infrastructure when the interest rates are low, so that we can grow our economy And if you've noticed, our economy is doing very well. It's growing well. And for the first time, actually, people's salaries are outstripping the growth. Yes, thank you, the cost of living. So our economy is growing faster, and we're making those investments to help that growth, help that transition, and to build a better quality social safety net. We've got our own policies and direction, the way we're doing it, and ours is working. You don't bring almost 1 million people out of poverty if your system isn't working. 300,000 seniors are lifted with the GIS improvements that we've done. We now have housing opportunities through our National Housing Plan. We have the lowest unemployment rate in over 40 years. These are not insignificant. So while the debt is very important, what we're tracking is debt to GDP, and we are going down. So we are making sure that we are having the payback power through a strong economy, and that it's at the lowest interest rate opportunity to make those investments that we need to grow that economy. And I know growth is a bad word, and it isn't about people. It's about growing opportunities in Canada. So that's what we're doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to both candidates. We're now going to wrap up with closing comments from each candidate, starting with Andrea.
Well, I'd just like to tie up, 2 minutes.
That's what the agenda says.
Okay, it is. Okay, I understand. Just to follow up with a few things Debbie mentioned, we also are in funding, increasing funding to innovation in science, STEM, and technical colleges, for renewable energy as well. CPP is going to be increased from 25% to 50%. There's, you need to look at the platform if you have the time. And I heard Deb say that we're on track. Well, you're not on track to meet your targets for reduction. And even the government admits that itself. And that target is half what it needs to be. Right? So we're not going to make it to the 30% reduction of emissions by 2030, let alone what we need to do, which is 60. And the economy's growing faster, made me think of Thelma and Louise, going faster and faster toward the cliff. We have to take our foot off the accelerator. We have to let the car slow down. When it's safe to put on the brakes, we put on the brakes. When it comes to a stop, we turn the wheel around and go the other way. And that's what we have to do. Our model of economy did not take into account the planet. And we've been living in a world where we're all stressed. When we change the world we're living in to make it a better place, more equitable, healthier, the side benefit is that we get to save enough ecological systems that our children and grandchildren should have a pretty decent life. I wanted to say also that Elizabeth May was a senior advisor to Tom McMillan and Mulroney's government, Minister of Environment. And she was there when Hans Martin gave him the updates. She's known about this. She also was part of the negotiating team to get acid rain approved by Mr. Reagan on the other side. We did that in the 80s. We did CFCs, and we did CFCs, and we got rid of the ozone problem, and that was the Montreal Protocol. And Elizabeth May's criticism of some of the ways the government currently in the last 4 years has tried to do things across provinces is to not there's a way to do it. There's a strategic way to do it. You go to your friendly province first. You get them to sign. You go one by one. We just need to do the right thing for our future. We need to change the way we live.
It's 2 minutes and it's going to go fast. I never got the chance tonight to talk about the really important work that we did on protected spaces. And I'll just give you an example. When we came into government, less than 1% marine and coastal areas were protected. We are now at 14%. We are doing important work on protecting natural spaces in Canada and to make sure that the habitat is there for iconic species that you talked about are rapidly disappearing. We are making progress on climate And she explained a little of the complications that we have, and we have to do better, all right? This is going to be a very close election, and I think we need to send a very strong message to politicians. And I'm really worried that if we go over to a conservative government, then you're going to send a very strong message that taking action on climate is too risky, and we won't get the action that we need and that we absolutely desperately need. So I don't want us to go backwards. We don't have time to waste another election cycle. So I'm counting on your support so that we can keep moving forward for our environment. Excuse me, I didn't interrupt you. Okay, we'll keep moving for our environment and do even more to curb emissions. Doug Ford said it really clearly not that long ago. He said, I'll let the federal election determine if I'm going to continue to fight against climate, the price on pollution. He said that really clearly. We need to send Doug Ford a really strong message that we need to continue, we need strong action on climate. And so we cannot be going backwards and give this election over to the Conservative government. Thank you very much. I really need your support.
Thank you, everybody. I'd just like to provide a few closing comments. First of all, I'd like to share my respect and empathy for both of you as candidates. It's not easy to get out there and talk about your passions, to knock on doors, to talk to people. I understand what that job is like. And I think just providing some of my own experiences as a local councillor when I first got in, my view I think was like this, my own. And then as I got there, the views begin to expand. You begin to realize that there's bigger issues than just your ward. And then if you go to the provincial level, you zoom out again, and you're looking at provincial-wide issues, and at the federal level, you're zooming out again. These are world issues that our candidates are stepping up to try to solve. And we have another candidates meeting, all candidates meeting on October 10th, and hopefully we'll have all the candidates after that, and hopefully you'll all come out, we'll have more people in front of us. Thanks to everyone. Thanks for
I won't say very much here right now at all because we've had a very long meeting. But I again want this theme is set very well and to depth. It's been a phenomenally informative night. I'm concerned if we have 4 or 5 candidates on the 10, how we're going to keep it under 3 hours. I'm not quite sure, but we'll see. But anyway, but with all that said, just a little sort of note some of this together. I appreciated Angela's comment at the end about economic things. We've had a lot of time about economy or about climate change and other things, and I guess I'm realizing how much the two need to fit together, and that's going to take some really great, wise thinkers as we go forward. A little bit, CCKT has just recently, we've embraced the climate emergency and the need for action. And just little tiny things, just a little thing. You'll notice we've got water in pictures on the table, and it's one of, if you want, it's one of the million and one things that we could do. And there's economic benefits. We didn't have to go to the store and buy water bottles. Yay! Air the cake that leaking out of the tap, which was just a miracle. Anyway, just to finish up, we are really glad and pleased and honored to put these events on and have you come. We do look forward to you coming next week if you can. There's an envelope on your chair, and I'm not one that must make a big deal with stuff like this, but it does cost, there are some costs of putting this on, and we welcome any free will donations that can be made, and just drop it off in a box at the back table. Anyway, please go out and talk to neighbors about just what's happened tonight, and stay informed, and thank you. Have a very good night.